Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Life by Design podcast. On this week's episode, I talk with Kira Sutherland. Kira is an Australian naturopath, herbalist, and sports nutritionist with over 30 years of clinical experience. She balances her time between the clinical practice, teaching at the undergraduate level, and mentoring health practitioners in holistic sports nutrition. Known for her straightforward teaching style, Kira aims to empower her clients and students to achieve their best selves, whether as athletes or healthcare professionals. She is a lifelong endurance athlete herself and the current performance nutritionist for the Sydney Marathon. In this week's episode, expect to learn the difference for men and women when it comes to nutrition, tracking your glucose numbers, sports nutrition, eating properly after exercise, and much, much more. Enjoy the episode. Kira Sutherland, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
You, my friend, might be one of my oldest friends on the podcast. When I say oldest, I'm talking about length of time.
I could be old too.
You're not.
Yes, we've known each other a long time.
What is it? 12 years? At
least, maybe more.
Did it start at Newzest or was it before that?
Newzest. I met you when we were helping create a product, Newzest, and then you and I started creating some nutrition plans for some of your programs.
That's right. Yeah. That is a long time ago.
I know. Another evolution for you.
Yes. Plenty's happened since. For the guys that don't know about you and your work, can you give them a 60 to 90 second spiel of who you are and what's got you to where you are today?
Sure. So I'm American born, if my accent goes in and out, but I've lived in Australia almost all my adult life. I am a naturopath, a nutritionist, a herbalist, and then also a sports nutritionist. So that's I've jumped from the more alternative complementary medicine into sports nutrition. But I've worked with clients. I've been a practitioner for 30 years, so I could be one of the older people on your podcast. But so I see clients, I lecture at university for decades and do a lot of, writing, creating, have some of my own courses. Yeah, I do all kinds of stuff, as we all do in my industry.
Yes, yes. What's changed the most in the last, say, 5 years in sports nutrition?
Ooh, a lot of the basics science-wise have not changed. We've just kind of made things more finite and specific. What has changed? I don't actually think there's that much science-wise. That sounds terrible because there's all kinds of amazing research. Oh, I know. We are now looking at people a lot more individually, or we're trying to look at the science of how women are different to men physiologically, although we don't have enough information to make any big statements about how we need to do it different, but we're beautifully celebrating both sexes and how our bodies are physiologically almost 30% different and how we maybe need to tailor it for individuals.
Based on that information, what would you tailor? And like if you were going to go kind of 30,000 foot view, men and women, what would you say is standing out to you at the difference in terms of individual programming or nutrition, etc.?
Yeah, well, beyond that, and I think science has always been there, but we're finally listening and going down into the genetics and the epigenetics and phenotypes and body types. And I think all of science and nutrition are really starting to look at how different we all are, not just the sexes. There's tiny little pocket rocket, put on muscle quickly people, tall, skinny, hard to put on muscle. And I think we're really starting to tease out how we can individualize, like different people have different circadian rhythms depending on your body type. I can guess your circadian rhythm, kind of need of when you should be waking and sleeping and eating, and it's not perfect, but it's this beautiful individual way of looking at people, because for years in health and nutrition and exercise, it's like everybody do this, everybody eat this, and for the people it works for, it's amazing. And then everybody else is like, I didn't lose weight, or I didn't gain muscle, I don't feel good. And we were kind of forced into thinking there was one belief.
Knowing what you know about me, what metrics would you consider? So obviously you were talking endomorph, ectomorph, those type of things. What else would you want to know? Like, I'm guessing age.
Yeah, age, family history. There's systems that we even like measure, body measure, to get into that ecto, endo, and all the combinations between them, because it's very rare to be a pure one of those. I would want to know kind of family history and ailments that you've experienced or family have had, so I can see if you're more inflammatory or what, as a naturopath, I want to know what systems you struggle with. Everybody, as much as we're health individuals, and you and I have always worked on our health, we still have stuff go wrong. But no matter how healthy you live, stuff happens. And I want to know what systems you struggle with, because that can guide me down body types as well. And just how you respond, your individual sensitivities or allergies, or what makes you feel good and what doesn't, what makes you happy, what doesn't, your mood, your emotional state. But that's the naturopath in me as well. I want to know every system. I want to know, yeah.
So when you say systems and the systems that someone struggles with, what exactly do you mean by that?
Well, like this will be, I'm not talking about you specifically, but you and all your friends, some people always have digestive trouble. Some people always have insomnia. Other people have constipation. Other people, like, I'm super healthy, but my immune system is lets more things in than I catch colds and flus really easy. And everyone's always like, oh, but you're so healthy. Why are you like that? And it's like, well, that's just my system that takes the stress. But I don't have digestive trouble. I didn't have cycle hormone trouble. Everybody has. In naturopathy, we have a belief, we used to call it the septic foci theory, which was literally, you just have a system that, due to maybe a childhood illness or hereditary or whatever, one system that's just more of an open window than other systems. And one of the beliefs in traditional naturopathy and healing is, if I can nourish that system, hopefully everything else operates better. But then again, traditional naturopathy is all about going after the digestive system. And if you heal the digestive system, a lot of other things are going to be supported. And we now know scientifically that almost your whole immune system sits in your digestive system. And we make so many neurochemical, we make serotonin in our digestive system, and a lot of our feel-good hormones come from our digestion. So
with your
I went in 8 directions there, sorry.
I know. I was trying to catch a late. With your background in nutrition and naturopathy, where do those two traditional schools of thought clash the most?
Ooh. Do they clash? They're part of each other. Like, naturopathy is a bigger umbrella than traditional holistic nutrition. If we're talking dietetics, that's slightly different again, and I can go down that if you want. But to be a naturopath, you end up as a herbalist and a nutritionist, and then those combine, and then there's some other things that get added. So naturopathy is like a bigger umbrella to being like a bachelor of health science in nutrition. So I don't think they clash. I just think they complement each other. I lecture in university in both degrees, and it's interesting because they don't clash. Sometimes with nutrition, I wish the nutritionists also had herbs, just because herbs help modulate or enhance the way systems work. It can support how your liver is functioning or your digestive system. And foods can do that, but not to the potency that herbs can. But herbs are a food in some ways.
But to your point earlier, dietetics potentially has a different school of thought. I mean,
Yes. Yeah.
as someone who's tried a number of different
Everything.
naturopaths and
Yeah.
dietitians, they
Yeah.
tend to, in my eyes, have a very different school of thought to what I've experienced with naturopaths and nutritionists. What's, for someone kind of looking from kind of surface level, what's the main difference between those?
What dietetics and
Yeah.
nutrition and like holistic nutrition. Look, originally dietetics was the degree. That was the university degree, and nutrition was more of an advanced diploma, but that changed about 20 years ago, and they're both degrees now. They're both amazing. I have friends in both industries, but dietetics is very focused on the macronutrients, so carbs, proteins, fats, looking at the numbers, calorie counting. They do look at nutrients, which we call micronutrients, which are like, vitamin C, vitamin E, but they are looking, they're who are in your hospital systems. They are your sports nutritionists usually. And they're amazing when, you've resected somebody's bowel and you can't absorb things. They're incredible at figuring out how to nourish and get the right nutrients in. Whereas holistic nutrition or naturopathy, we approach, I guess the simplistic way is we are taught kind of food is medicine. And so we're looking a lot more at the signals food is giving to our immune system or are reacting to it. I really believe the systems are getting closer together, but we are much more taught, this person has hypothyroid, slow thyroid. There's a thyroid nourishing diet that has the right nutrients to support that functioning. We do use a lot more supplements. Whether that's good or bad, I don't actually want to have a big opinion because it works different for different people. I think there's practitioners that give way too many supplements, and there's practitioners that are incredibly targeted and do wonders. But we do tend to work a lot more with larger doses of nutrient. What we call optimum dose rather than minimum dose to kind of shove things along. But really, with the science and nutrition, I feel like everybody's getting closer together anyway. Did that make any sense? That explanation?
It did.
They're both super useful. You just got to find, with any healing modality, massage, personal trainer, you got to find the right person for you in that moment. And it's like, I go to 3 different chiropractors, not because they're not all good. They just serve different purposes for me. And you got to find the right practitioner for you, personality wise, belief wise. I think there's a lot said for finding your practitioners and sometimes evolving to new practitioners, right?
Yeah. So research and science has had an interesting repositioning potentially over the last 4 to 5 years with what's happened in the world, and people start to see research and science a little bit differently, knowing that certain research is funded and certain outcomes are biased. So how do you, because you are excellent at research, better than anyone I know, how do you decipher, how do you kind of work your way through all of the noise, knowing that some's funded and that some is biased? Yeah. How do you do it?
And research has to be funded, but it's always about looking behind who is doing the funding and what is their goal. And it's also like, extrapolating what the research actually says, because you can have a big title about what you think that research is saying. And then if you only read the abstract, it's a summary, but you can get really influenced. Where if you go down into the nitty gritty of the research, who was researched, how long did they research for, what parameters did they actually look at? It's a long journey to figure out how to read research. I love research and I love evidence, but I also love, and this is the naturopath in me, I love more empirical data, or what's the experience for the person, because no matter what the research says, if it doesn't work for you, I got to find something different. And I guess when I studied naturopathy originally, we weren't research deep. We were generations and hundreds and thousands of years of use of herbal medicines, because that used to be our only medicine until 200 years ago. So I know these medicines work, or herbs, even though I don't have research to back it up. And if there's 2,000 years of usage, and it's not been killing people, I'm comfortable with empirical data to an extent. I'm not going to do anything renegade and crazy. So I kind of sit between this. I love research and where it's going and what we're learning, but I also love traditional usage. There's a woman who won a Nobel Prize probably 10 years ago in science. She was a Chinese researcher, and she won the Nobel Prize by synthesizing a chemical out of a herb for malaria. Like, malaria worldwide kills, I don't even know how many people. She won the Nobel Prize for that. It's amazing. But in traditional use, we've used that herb for malaria for thousands of years. We already knew that. Just because we didn't have the research on it doesn't mean it doesn't work, right? So there's that weird dichotomy between, I live in both worlds, I guess is what I'm going to say.
Well, that's what's fascinating to talk
Yeah.
to you about, because you do live in both worlds, whereas it's easy to, I've always been, you obviously know me well enough, I've always been more on the kind of traditional naturopathy side than the, and found myself fighting regularly with academics who, were kind of so research-based, and I was like, well, this stuff's been around hundreds of years. Forever.
Yeah.
So it's good to speak to you who gets to see both sides.
And I can be cynical about it. I can be frustrated. I may or may not yell at my phone sometimes when I'm on social media. There are incredible researcher, bloggers, podcasters out there that are showing you the science now of, cold water, hot water, breathing. That was talked about in Babylonian, like ancient pre-Greek Roman, and the Greeks and the Romans were talking about this 400 BCE, I think I'm supposed to say now. They were talking about breathing and right diet and movement and sleep. This shit is not, can I say shit? Sorry.
Yes, please.
This shit is not fucking new, right? And I love that the research is finally there, but sometimes I'm frustrated that natural medicine doesn't give credit for holding that space all those years, right? Like, it's amazing that I can listen to, Huberman talk about all this stuff. And I'm like, just give us credit for like continuing the legacy through. And now we have this incredible research. But yeah. So there's a part of me that is like, I'm frustrated it doesn't get credit, but I'm relieved that there's research, so people that need the research will now do it. So part of me as the healer or practitioner, health worker, is like, it's okay, I'm going to celebrate that the info's out there on a mainstream level. I think that's where I come to with it, because I'm not here to fight a political fight about anything like that. I'm here to just get people healthier.
I have a goal at the moment. And I'm interested
as much as possible before you
before I have a baby. That's my goal. Help me do it. I have a goal at the moment, which I find really interesting. I don't know if I've ever got the formula, so I'm interested in seeing how you navigate this. And it's to improve my body composition and improve my performance in order to hit a certain target with high rocks. Now, they can work together, but also potentially block each other in a roundabout way. How would you navigate someone who's trying to essentially fuel for performance while also improve body composition? Talk me through how you do that.
Well, we look at who's in front of us. What is their body type and parameter? How tall? What is, what is somebody's goal, body, physique, and type versus what is their genetics? Because I think with social media and how visual we are, we have these ideas of what we want to look like. But for some, like, I'm almost 5'10". I am never, and I'm lean, but I'm built like a Viking warrior. I'm not built like a ballerina, right? And had I wanted to be a ballerina, I would have been shit out of luck, right? I can't get to that physique. It doesn't, well, I could, but I would be having an eating disorder.
Yeah.
So I think it's very much about who's the person in front of me physically and what is their reality of what we can get their body to. I think there's a big problem in some health industries around that, because people will come, they'll be like, I want to be this percentage of body fat. And like, that's totally doable for some body types. So for other body types, they're not going to get anywhere near it unless they go into a very dangerous state of eating and training. So I'm all about the reality of what the person wants versus their, what we would call, when you combine genotype and epigenetics, we call it a phenotype, what their body's capable of, and is it going to be able to maintain optimum health to get there? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's excellent.
So that's the first thing I would look at. And then I also need to look at what do you intake already? And what do you what do you do? What do you exercise or rest or do vagal nerve or, all the different things you do, and how each of those is either going to be supporting or subtracting from what those goals are. So it's that real, I say this to a lot of clients as I'm talking to them when we talk about how tall are you, how much do you weigh, what's your body fat, if we haven't scanned it. And I'm like, and what's your realistic, I say, what's your goal? And then I ask the question after that, I say, and what's your realistic goal? Because most people know what their realistic goal is, but also I need to know their mental state of what they want versus what they know their reality is. Because, your mental, emotional has to be in the game with the physical. And I think that's an area I focus on as well. Did that answer your question in any way?
I liked it. It's given me a bit to think about.
It's much more holistic. Yeah, because we have these, I get people coming in, they're going to do body, they're going to go in, they start, oh my God, I've gone blank, not weightlifting, but, body sculpting and whether it's a male or a female. And these people, my trainer says I should get to this body fat. And I work with a lot of coaches and trainers. There's some very wise people out there, but they're like, this is my body fat goal. And I'm like, well, for your body type, that might not happen. You're going to go into a very unhealthy state to get there. So I think it's, I think deep down we know. And the more we accept how beautiful our physiology is, no matter how we're built, life becomes a lot easier and a lot healthier mentally and physically. Oh, I sound very philosophical this morning.
You're on for a Friday. I'm very interested in your thoughts on how familiar are you with like the Whoop band? Do you know
the what?
Whoop?
Oh, Whoop. Yes, I'm very familiar with biometrics. I don't have a Whoop. I have a Oura Ring, but I researched them both in between choosing.
Oh my God!
And I'm not sponsored by anybody.
All right, I've got a good one for you. So I did a cleanse with a group called Corrective Culture, which was very like no sugar at all, pretty much. I think I could have green apples and the rest like no sugar.
Yeah.
And
so how long was the cleanse?
Well, the formal cleanse was for 3 weeks. It started with a 3-day fast and then went into the cleanse. So it's like a parasite.
Juice or water fast?
Water and broth.
Okay, just checking. Because everyone says fast and then I'm like, I need to qualify.
Oh, yeah, good one. Yeah. So a parasite cleanse. What I found fascinating, and I'm potentially considering working back towards something like it that is sustainable, 6 out of 7 nights a week when I was doing this cleanse. So I did the formal cleanse, and then I kind of followed the principles for another.
Healthy eating, low sugar. Yep.
My recoveries were the best I have ever seen. By 6 out of 7 nights a week, I was in the green, so 66% and above. Now, my nutrition now is still excellent, but bringing back in sugar in forms of fruits my recovery has absolutely plummeted, as has me bringing, because I was on coconut yogurt with the cleanse, and then I've gone to dairy. It's the only dairy that I have. But I am fascinated by the impact that sugar has on my recovery, especially when the sugar that I'm having now is literally
Healthy
raw
sugar.
honey and fruit in order to, and a couple of dates a day to preload my training.
Yeah.
Wild the impact that it's had on my recovery.
Yeah. So I would look, and everybody's going to be different. My thoughts are so my brain goes in like 80 different directions.
I love this.
I
love this.
What fruits have you brought back in? And I would probably investigate playing around with different fruits that you maybe don't react like that with different fruits, right? Because fruits all have different ratios of fructose to glucose as well. And how is your body processing that? All sugar, I want to be careful how I say this. Not all sugar is bad. We need some fruit sugar. We need carbohydrate, unless we're doing ketosis, and that's another conversation in itself. I consider what foods you're having that maybe aren't suiting you. Number 2, timing of when you're having it. Is it just pre-workout and post-workout, or at other times? What time of day you're having all your meals and your foods, and are you snacking all day rather than often when we're on a cleanse, we're having very specific meal times, and have you brought in eating a lot more frequently, and that's keeping your body and your digestive system busy rather than allowing it to relax? Are you when we're on a cleanse, you often exercise less because you're doing a detox, letting the body release, so you're not training as hard. And so what time of day are you training? What are you doing? And is that impacting your recovery as well? Because I know with a lot of parameters that get measured, if you train really hard, your recovery doesn't look good the next day because you've done something really hard. So where are those numbers coming in? And I know you love your numbers. And I'm married to somebody who numbers every day. And he's always like, oh my God. I'm like, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, you went for a 6-hour bike ride yesterday. You oxidized yourself. Your body is like, yes, you mentally are used to that. But when we remove, say the word inflammatory foods, but are foods actually inflammatory? It's different for each person. So I would also look at what you've brought back in that your body's not happy with, right? Or are you a person that dairy is harder for you, even though it's yogurt? I'm sure it's like full fat Greek yogurt, and just looking at all those little bits to optimize it. And you can't live a perfect life. Like, I love my chocolate. I ate dark chocolate last night. This is not about being perfect, but those are my first thoughts is, when people do any new diet, or, when people decide to be vegetarian and they've eaten a lot of junk before that, or they do a cleanse, you often feel amazing because you're like the strictest you've ever been. And so you feel phenomenal, and as you bring things back in, but I would look at those individual things and question. But timing, I would also look at, and sleep, and because we look at a lot of chronic disease and illness is a product of, this is very naturopathic to say this, but we look at this are you in a chronic state of inflammation from the food you eat, from the exercise, from the chemicals we're around, from the electronic pollution, everything affects us. And cleanses are very anti-inflammatory, and then regular life is inflammatory. So it's where's that dial, and can you have perfect numbers every day? You're not supposed to have perfect numbers every day. I know you would like them.
That is what I like.
But
it is interesting though. And I mean, it's kind of obvious in a roundabout way to play with the different foods and see which one is having the most impact on it. Whether it's bringing back the dairy with the yogurt, or it's mango, or it's banana. There's only a handful of things that have changed, but it'll be really interesting to see which one has the most
timing. In Ayurvedic medicine, You're not supposed to have yogurt after sunset because
Really?
your digestive function, are you having it after dinner?
Nah,
As a
it's for
treat?
breakfast. No,
Okay.
no. Yeah.
Because I'll continue the thought though for people. Your digestive fire, how you process foods, goes to sleep with the sun. And so mucus forming foods like yogurt or banana and things like that are harder for your body to process in the evening. And I loved yogurt with honey after dinner as like a treat. And I remember learning that and being like, that ruins it for me during the day. You know, and we know scientifically now we have circadian rhythms for sleep and wake, but every organ in the body has its own circadian rhythm where it's functioning better or not. And this is actually in science what I'm loving over the last 5 years, which isn't so much sports nutrition, but you know, your digestive system has a rhythm, right? Where it's your digestion and the way your pancreas works and your insulin and how it deals with food works better in the morning through about 2 or 3 p.m. And then it actually drops off in its function and ability. It still works, but not to the same level. So the same meal eaten at 10 a.m. will have a different blood sugar impact and digestive, like it'll go through the digestive system better. You won't have as big of a blood sugar spike as the same meal eaten at dinner.
That is fascinating.
And people aren't talking about that enough. And then that makes my brain think back to the question you asked. Each person responds differently to different foods. Like you and I could wear a continual blood glucose monitor and we could both eat the same amount of full fat Greek yogurt at 10 a.m., but you could have a higher spike in blood sugar than I do because you react differently to that food than I do. Right? Like when we put people into ketogenic diets, some people have to pull out dairy because they have too big of a reaction to the lactose, and other people don't have a big reaction to it and they can stay on dairy. So we are so individual. Continual blood glucose monitors, you ever worn one?
Shani's got the little strips. Is that the same thing where she pricks herself and then gets a reading?
Yeah, well, that's doing exactly the same thing. But if you don't want a finger prick for about $100, it lasts 2 weeks. It has just a tiny filament like needle it has a little machine that sticks it on. On my Instagram page, probably half a year back, there's a video of me actually putting one on. So it's like a little disc that continually reads your blood glucose level, and you just scan it and it goes to an app on your phone. I can't believe you as a numbers person haven't done
I would love this.
Yeah. They're amazing. They're created originally for diabetics so that they don't have to keep finger pricking, but it gives you a continual blood glucose monitor. I mean, they're not perfect, but it's fascinating to watch how you react to a meal when you've just eaten the meal, or if you exercise first and then how you react to the meal, because you won't have as big of a blood sugar spike. How you react. I play a lot with it with individual foods. There's a female researcher in Israel who was looking at how we all react differently to different foods, blood sugar wise. And we know different combinations. Like even we know now, if you eat your greens first and then your protein and then your carb, you won't have nearly the blood sugar spike as if you eat your carb first, which is no fun, but.
That is fascinating.
Yeah. Or if you have a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar while you're eating, it pulls down your blood sugar levels. Like there's some really interesting stuff happening in biometrics with nutrition. But again, you and I could act totally differently to the same food. So I'm going to question that yogurt.
I'm interested to see what responds.
Or I kind of know what fruits you're probably eating because I know you, but it'd be interesting. And maybe banana is not working for you, or dates, which are like would be so sad. But yeah.
So I've got 2 schools of thought that I want to try to stay with. So what would be a number that you would consider not ideal post a meal? Like let's say that I start, because Shani's got a whole bunch of strips, and I'll explain why she's got those strips.
Oh, okay. I think people get too hooked on the numbers, because I've had this
Okay.
happen with university students, because I was showing them the blood glucose monitors and it's like, oh my God, I went up to like an 8 after this meal. It's normal. Poor blood sugar regulation, when you eat, your body, your blood sugars are supposed to go up.
Yeah.
And then your body comes in and pulls it down. What we're more interested in, and yes, if you go way too high, there's an issue. I don't actually want to give those numbers though, because it's different for each person.
Yeah.
But it's also about how quickly your body re-regulates itself. And if it takes too long for it to go back down, that's when we're looking at is your body producing, your health, are your cells and your insulin responding properly, or is there an issue going on with the insulin or insulin resistance, as we would say, where your body's not, because the danger is blood sugar staying too high for too long start damaging, people don't realize, but it damages your microcirculation, it damages your nervous system. Too high of sugar all the time is like very aging and inflammatory for the brain. So we don't want them high long. And that's the problem when people have, insulin resistance or pre-diabetes, is things are staying too high. So, I've even heard, and this is not a scientific statement, but they talk about dementia being like diabetes of the brain. And that's what they're talking about, is too high of sugars for too long floating around and causing inflammatory. There's a whole scientific stuff behind it, but yeah, I'm making generalized statements right now.
I like it.
Yeah. Where should blood sugars, everyone's different depending on their age and their fitness level, where their blood sugars sit, but there's a general range you want to try to sit in. And over in America, they use totally different numbers than we do metric wise, right? But if you're dealing with like a type 1 diabetic who's actually, has to input insulin every day, their goal is usually to try to maintain between 4 and 8. But that's a type 1 diabetic, that's their goal range, to try to stay there as much as possible. But, if you ate a huge serving of sweet potato fries.
Delicious.
I know. We both have a sweet potato thing, and I had some last night.
Would that spike it?
Oh, I didn't have a monitor on, but I know it spiked. I know it spikes it. I spiked with sweet potato, like I cry when I look at my sweet potato spike. So I have to have it with protein first. Fries come first when you're out to dinner, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, I will easily spike to 8, or maybe even, it also depends, we also have to back up, because these are numbers, and I know you love your numbers. If I haven't slept well, if I'm short of sleep, my blood sugar control will not be as good the next day. And people don't know that, or don't realize.
That's fascinating.
We have science on that as well. If you exercise, your blood sugar control will be better, not just for the rest of the day, but potentially for a couple days, you have better control. So you could do a glucose monitor and be exercising. You're like, oh, sugars are amazing, and then take a week off of exercise and still eat all the same foods, you would have a different parameter. And hypothetically, for females, you might have slightly different, some females might, some might not. You have different blood sugar control depending on your hormone profile during the month.
Yeah.
Right? Because progesterone, like the difference between when we're higher estrogen, low progesterone, versus when both hormones are high is very different. That's why we have cravings near that, right before a female has her, before someone has a period, because progesterone's really high, and that makes it harder to utilize fuels differently. That's a whole topic in itself. But yeah, and I'm sure it would be the same for men, although your cyclical hormone profile is a 24-hour cycle,
as opposed to 28-day.
Yeah.
Even that's fascinating.
You guys are daily cyclical. we're, monthly.
Yeah.
Monthly, as they
Well,
say. Moon cycles.
It's interesting, this topic, because recently, in the last few days, we've found out that Shani is potentially running risk of gestational
Diabetes, which is super common. Yeah.
And to the point of, I don't know enough about it outside of food, to be honest.
Yeah. And really healthy, let me back up. Really healthy women do end up with gestational diabetes sometimes. I don't know the research behind, like, it's not a big forte area for me, but just so she's not feeling, and those women that end up as JSO, because she'll be like pulling herself apart about it, I'm sure. It's not, sometimes that just happens. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's exactly my point, whether it's hormone or something, I can't remember, because I've never seen a pregnant woman eat better in my life. And we know other people that just eat like probably like normal.
Oh no, I have friends.
Yeah.
There's,
so that's
the pregnant body is like, it's like when people have a miscarriage or not. I know this is probably not a topic for your podcast, but some of the healthiest people I know who did months of preconception care still had miscarriages. And some of my biggest partying friends, no preconception care, no trouble. Like, it's not, that's it. It's its own little magic pregnancy. And so she's testing. I figured that must be it if she was testing. So she should be really, like we were talking about, protein first. She needs carbs. You crave carbs when you're pregnant. You're growing a baby, you're growing another human. But leaning in on the veg and the protein first, not the starchy veg, like the green veg and then the protein, and then when having her carb at the end of the meal. I'd be curious if that helps. I'm just walking or whatever, I'm not a fan of women pummeling themselves with exercise while they're pregnant. I'm a fan of them checking in with their body and what it wants them to do. You didn't know me when I have one child, but you know my child, but you didn't know me when I was pregnant. But I was doing Ironman before I fell pregnant. I had just done gazillion halves and a 3 full Ironman. So I was like, I'm going to run my whole pregnancy. Got to like month 3 and I was like, I'm never running while I'm pregnant. That's disgusting. I feel terrible. Whereas I know other people that ran their whole pregnancy and they felt awesome. Did not work for me. I was like, I will be walking and doing like yoga. That's all I did. I went from Ironman fitness to a walker, and my body was really happy with me. So there's this surrender for everybody. And I'm not talking about pregnancy now, because I know you have a lot of guys in your podcast. Wherever stage you're at, what you think you should be doing versus what your body is asking you to do, I think is a powerful thing.
What's one thing that everyone needs to know when it comes to sports nutrition?
That, I have like 2 things. That fasted training is not all it's cracked up to be. There's times and places to fasted train, and there's times where you're not helping yourself, and you'll feel better if you eat a little something before training. But the biggest thing is, I'm a huge fan, I'm going to say this, of people eating properly after training. Your body is like primed. You've exercised, you've depleted your fuel stores. Your body is biochemically ready to refuel itself and create more carb or glycogen in your muscles. And do you have to eat the exact minute you finish training? No, but my heart breaks when I meet people that are really into intermittent fasting, and they fast before exercise and then they continue their fast for a couple hours after exercise. And my heart just breaks, because exercise is a stress for the body. It's a good stress, but it's a stress. And the way we turn down some of those stress hormones after exercise is by eating. And by not doing that, we're leaving cortisol higher, and we're leaving, it just makes me sad. So eating really properly after exercise, you're going to feel better the rest of the day. And it's amazing how many people I meet that are trying to lose their last few kilos and they can't do it. And all we do is change the timing of when they're eating. We get them to eat a little bit before training, and then they end up feeling better and they train harder. Yes, they don't burn 2 or 3 extra grams of fat or whatever it is. And then you get them eating properly after training, and the body's like, oh, you're exercising me and then you're making me feel safe by feeding me. I can let go of that extra I've been holding on to because I never know when my next meal is coming. And don't get me wrong, I love intermittent fasting for the right person, the right style of IF. And I think that blanket style of IF, a lot of people do, I think is an issue. Those are my 2 things. Eating. It's a safest time to be eating as well, to not gain weight, because so many people are fearful of gaining weight. You know, the fuel you get to eat, the food you get to eat after exercise, your body's going to turn it into amazing stuff. It's going to make muscles. It's going to make glycogen. It's not going to turn into body fat. Even if you're scared of carbs, best time to eat your carbs is right after training. And you don't have as big of a blood sugar spike after training as if you have that carb at another time. It's like your safe space.
I don't think I've ever. I have. No? I don't think I've. Well, I don't think I've heard it. I don't think I've heard therapy mixed with pre and post workout nutrition when we're talking about safe spaces and carb intake.
Think about how scared everybody is around carbs, right? Over the last
Are they still
decade
scared?
or 2.
I've been out of the game for 5 years. Are they still scared?
Some are, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Look, even before that, like Gen X, some people are still scared of fat, for God's sakes, right? Like
that's a long time ago.
Food myths have horrible hangovers, depending on who you grew up with or what you read. Yeah, there's definitely carb phobic people, really carb phobic. Yeah, not as bad as 10 years ago, but
yeah, I remember that patch. For those that want to find out about your work, where is the best spot to send them? Because you've got a few things going on these days, which
the best place to find me, my website is literally my name, so kirasutherland.com.au. Or my Instagram, which is probably where I'm most active on socials, is Uber Health. One word, like Uber and then health. And that has been my business name almost a decade longer than Uber. So it's not, but I'm not going to change it.
Imagine if they reached out to you and said,
we're actually looking.
Really?
Yeah, but yeah. The negotiation didn't go anywhere. Yes, Uber has a business called Uber Health, but they've separated it into 2 words. And they have, this is in Australia. They have, I have a very set trademark area, and they have a set trademark area just to the side of it.
Fascinating. That is fascinating.
It bothered me for a while. It's all right. But I did come first.
That's what matters, ladies and gentlemen.
Everyone goes, oh, that's such a cool name. And I was like, no, it was cool in like 25 years ago.
I think it's cool. I like it.
But yeah, I'm on Uber Health in socials.
Beautiful. Good to have you on. I think we'll have to get you back on. I feel we've cut a little bit short, but we'll get you back on to do another episode.
That's fun. Always good to chat to you.